Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us for this very special occasion as we proudly present two individuals who really don't need any introduction at all, because most of us are only too aware of their accomplishments. They are, of course, pioneering serial entrepreneur and four-time author, I believe, Tom Siebel, and Forbes Publisher, and also author of multiple best-selling books, Rich Karlgaard, who also happens to be the co-founder of the Churchill Club. In their conversation called Opportunities, Risks, and the Digital Transformation Gold Rush, Tom and Rich will address four significant trends that are unfolding: elastic cloud computing, big data, AI, and IoT, and then talk about the implications that Tom sees or that Rich sees for opportunities ahead for specifically innovation and economic growth. The catalyst for this event was Tom's latest book called Digital Transformation: Survive and Thrive in an Era of Mass Extinction. Courtesy of Tom, there is a signed first edition of this book for everyone here tonight. So thank you so much, Tom. And that will be available for you to pick up after the onstage program. As always, there are lots of people and groups to thank. Certainly, in addition to Tom, we thank Rich Karlgaard and Lauren Kuhn for their assistance with this program. We also thank Microsoft Reactor, especially Josh Lubke and Alexa Easley for hosting us. We appreciate that very much. And finally, to 3M and Henry Chang, very special thanks for your support as well, and welcome. If this is your first time attending a Churchill Club program, I'm pleased to offer a brief introduction. Founded in 1985 and kicking off with our first speaker, Bob Noyce, then CEO of Intel, a controversial talk at the time, I understand. Today we are the premier independent thought leadership forum or platform here in the Bay Area. Our nonprofit mission is to strengthen innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. And we do this through up to, say, 24 programs that we present every year. We look for what is new, what is next, what is not widely known, because that helps us to lean into the topics instead of repeating things that perhaps are better known already. We try to pick up where those conversations take off. So before we bring up our speakers, there is one more thing to say, and that is that the hashtag is Churchill Club. You'll find other Twitter codes in your programs. So let's now welcome our guest of honor, Tom Siebel and Rich Karlgaard. Welcome.
You beat me in shoes. Those are handsome shoes. I just wrote this book called Late Bloomers, and I was thinking about your career, and I want to get a little bit into the career projection before we get into C3.ai and what it means and your motivations and the big problems that it's solving. But Tom grew up in suburban Chicago, went to the University of Illinois, but then you took some time off. I know you dabbled in the publishing industry, you knocked around Montana, and then suddenly in your late 20s, you were motivated to go back and get a computer science degree, which I think is a really cool late bloomer thing to do, that you took the time you needed to do it. What motivated you to do that? And then describe how that led you to Oracle in its early days and the beginning of your terrific career.
Well, my undergraduate degree was in history. I studied the history of science. And my first job out of undergraduate school was, I was a cowboy in Idaho. And so I moved cattle and cut hay, baled hay, and then worked at S&V Construction in Haley, Idaho. I was a supervisor of a shovel, and used to carry that big Johns Manville asbestos pipe, for which they've now gone bankrupt, so I used to load that and unload it from trucks. And then ended up in the book publishing business with a friend of yours by the name of Jameson Campaign. I believe we published your first book in maybe 1978 or 9.
I met Tom at the Boston Marathon.
The last word on
Yeah.
running.
In 1979, we manned a booth.
Rich and I go way back.
Yeah. Do you remember who our neighbors were?
And that in that booth?
Yeah, no, the booth next door.
No, I don't.
All American Jog Bra Company.
There you go. And so then it was clear that we were going, it was the country was getting ready to go into a recession, and I thought I would go to graduate school to learn the languages of commerce so I could play the game. And so I was a resident of Illinois, and so I could afford to go to the University of Illinois. So I went to graduate school of business at the University of Illinois to learn languages of finance and marketing and accounting and what have you, so I could play that game a little bit more effectively. In the course of doing that, I took an operations research class and began to work in their computer lab and began to be kind of pretty excited about this technology. Now we're dealing with mainframe computers and we're programming on, key punch cards, Hollerith cards, right? And so this is definitely the old days. And then I read a book that had a big impact upon my life that I talk about in this book, written by a guy named Daniel Bell from Harvard, where this book was entitled The Coming Post-Industrial Society, and he described this information era that we've been living for the last 4 decades. And so I decided to learn the language of that game and got admitted to the Graduate School of Engineering at the University of Illinois. Did my graduate work in relational database theory back when there was virtually no relational database market. And then I went to work for a young entrepreneur in Menlo Park by the name of Larry Ellison. So that was that's how it all got started.
And how many people were at Oracle when you joined?
20 people.
20 people. Did he take kindly to you because he was from Illinois also?
Well, back then, everybody had to interview with Larry, and the other person ran the firm, Bob Miner. And they were a very talented group of people. And, if you wanted to play in the relational database game in that era, the companies in the space were IBM. They had a product called System R, a company called Sperry in Minneapolis that had a product called Mapper. And then it was Oracle. That was pretty much it. Then there was another company in Berkeley that didn't last very long. And but these guys at Oracle seemed like pretty bright guys and looked like they might pull it off. And so I decided to throw my hat in with them, and it turned out to be a pretty good idea.
Well, you got to participate and lead a tremendous period of growth at Oracle, something that would echo years later when you started Siebel Systems. I was just looking up the sales growth of Siebel Systems in the 1990s. Did you launch in 95, was it, or 96?
No, we did 93. Pat House and I started the company in July of 1993. And the idea was, I actually took this idea to Larry about applying information technology and communication technology to the problem of sales, marketing, customer service, which was now known as the CRM market, and we coined that term. And Larry had no interest in that business, and so I left, and Pat and I had worked together, had been colleagues at Oracle, and I forget what she was doing at the time, and I gave her a call, and she dropped whatever she was doing and came over to the house, and we put together the business plan for this company called Siebel Systems, and that was July of 1993. By 2000, we had 8,000 employees in 29 countries. We were doing $2 billion in revenue. We had a $53 billion market valuation. That's when $53 billion was still a lot of money, so I know it's hard for you guys to relate to. And,
that would be equivalent to VMware today.
That is the largest, fastest growing enterprise application software company, fastest growing software company in history. And so that was quite an experience. Fastest to $1 billion, fastest to $2 billion, and I can assure you it was the professional experience of a lifetime.
Yeah, I looked this up today, that in Fortune magazine, that other magazine that begins with FOR, in 1998, you were the fastest growing company in America, 99, number 3, and 2000 back up to number 2.
Yeah, it was quite an experience.
What did, just touching once again on Oracle, since you were there for that fast growth, what did you learn about that experience that you brought to Siebel, and what did you learn from Larry Ellison? Because he did have an amazing ability to attract talent, and maybe more than a lot of other companies, a lot of Oracle alums have gone out and taken the entrepreneurial path to great success.
A lot of Siebel alums who've taken the path to entrepreneurial success. We've got including one here, Dan Streetman's here. He's the CEO of TIBCO. And so Vinnie Smith at Quest, there Documentum, who is Dave DeWalt, David Schmeier at Velocity, Dave DeWalt at Documentum, and then he went on to FireEye. So there's, so working with Larry. So I spent a decade working with Larry, and Larry is a gifted guy, make no mistake, and he's built, one of the great information technology companies. But I have to say that, and it was a great learning experience. I will tell you that. But when Pat and I formed Siebel, I would say the litmus test that we used for almost every decision was, what would Larry do? And we did the opposite, okay? And so I think I learned more how not to run a software company than how to run a software company. With that being said, it was a professional experience of a lifetime and a great learning experience, and Larry Ellison is an extraordinarily talented guy.
Well, eventually you sold Siebel Systems to Oracle, and then you were in a position where, my goodness, the writer Tom Wolfe. I always think of Tom Wolfe because Karen mentioned Bob Noyce as the first Churchill Club speaker in November 1985. And the great writer Tom Wolfe, who wrote The Right Stuff on the astronauts and had written all kinds of
electric Kool-Aid acid test.
Electric Kool-Aid acid test following Ken Kesey and those guys around in the 1960s. He claimed he never participated in the chemical part of that journey. But in fact, he wore a coat and a tie as he was following the merry pranksters around, if you can believe it. But he wrote that piece, and God, I got so tangled up in my thoughts now. Where was I going with that? Good Lord. Oh well. He would have called you a man in full. He had a novel called A Man in Full. So you sell Siebel Systems to Oracle. You're a man in full. You're a multi-billionaire. You're beginning life as an acknowledged major philanthropist. You're an outdoorsman. You've got a huge ranch that is both fun but also a business ranch in Montana. You're a man in full. Why do another company?
Great question. If I might tell an anecdote, so after we started Siebel, Larry, the way that Larry will, became kind of very emotional about it, and decided that very publicly, that he was going to put us out of business. And so he staffed 3,000 people for a decade to take us out of the CRM market, and 10 years later, he had less than 1% market share. That being said, this battle was fought on the front page of Business Week and Forbes and Fortune and the Wall Street Journal, and he was quite vocal and quite emotional. And it was, the media kind of loves to write about these catfights. And so there was a lot of media attention. It was very rancorous. And I'll never forget, I think it was about the fall of 2005 when my assistant says, it's Larry Ellison on the phone. I thought, oh my God. And so I picked up the phone and I said, well, Larry, I assume you're not looking for a sponsor for your America's Cup boat. Without skipping a beat, he says, that's not a bad idea, but we need to put the names in alphabetical order. And then one thing led to another, and Siebel Systems is now part of Oracle Corporation very successfully. But why, after 4 decades do I find myself as the CEO of yet another computer software company? That's a great idea. That's a good question. And I ask myself that every morning. No, seriously. I have a great job. I work with enormously talented people. I get to work with really gifted customers with whom we have, I would say, intimate relationships, and one is here tonight, 3M, thank you very much. I do this because, maybe there's not much I'm good at. If I could play golf, maybe I would do that, but, I can't do that. And, if there's anything I'm good at, it is assembling a group of talented people, and I have been fortunate in my professional career to be in the right place at the right time 3 times, and then not completely botch the opportunity. And so I think now we find ourselves in the right place at the right time again, and we're going to try to not goof up the opportunity.
Now, when I first came across C3, I just naturally assumed C3 meant company number 3 by Tom Siebel, because there was an interim between Oracle and Siebel Systems where Tom was the CEO of a software company called Gain, which he sold
before Siebel,
to Sybase.
Yeah.
So I figured it was your 3rd company, but in fact you didn't you start C3? It stands for something else. And didn't you have this kind of non-profit idea of using IT to take carbon out of the atmosphere?
Yeah, good memory. So you'll recall that in the, if we get into the 2006, 2007, 2008 timeframe, there's lots of discussion about global warming, cap and trade, carbon tax. If we had an energy policy at the time, it had to do with, kind of occupying the Middle East, and that was kind of it. And so we got together with a team of people, many of whom are here tonight. Pat was there, and Dan was there, and the energy team from McKinsey & Company, a lot of the founders of Siebel Systems, like David Schmeier, who you know, Ed Abbo, people from Intel, Oracle, SAP, from all over around the world. And we got together to talk about how we could have an impact on the energy dialogue at global scale. So the original idea was about taking what we saw as a new step function in information technology, these being the emergence and confluence of elastic cloud computing, big data, IoT, and AI, and applying those to the energy dialogue to see if we could have an impact on the energy dialogue at global scale. And so it was about building a technology foundation. It started out of a philanthropic effort, and by the end of 2000, we met in the spring, summer, and fall of 2008, and Pat House, the way that Pat House will do, kind of took charge of the situation and put everybody off in work groups, and kept right on schedule with their action items. And by the end of the year, it became apparent that we could have a larger impact as a for-profit corporation than a non-profit philanthropy. And so then the idea came to found this company, and there were about 50 people in the room, and I said, well, who wants to be CEO, because I'm not going to do it. And then I sent out an email on Friday night. We raised $20 million by Sunday, and the company was funded. And so, yes, it did very much start as a clean energy company. And we worked with organizations like Cisco, and I think there's some people from Cisco here tonight, and we reduced Cisco's energy and carbon footprint by 15% at 700 facilities around the world. Dow Chemical, General Electric, long story, and others. And we went from doing it at the enterprise to then doing it at grid scale with PG&E and Con Ed, New York Power Authority, and Duke, and NAL in Europe, and Engie. And so then after we had done this at grid scale quite successfully, where we can use these technologies, the grid is the largest and most complex machine ever built. And we can, and it is being censored, it's becoming this thing called the smart grid, right? So that all the assets in the grid infrastructure are being censored, so they're remotely machine addressable. Generation, transmission, distribution, meters, thermostats, what have you. And so these sensors generate massive amounts of data, and we can take all these signals and apply AI to increase the efficiency of the grid by maybe 30%, increase the resilience, increase the cybersecurity, increase the reliability, reduce the power that it takes, the fuel that it takes to power the grid by maybe 10%, and cut out the greenhouse gas footprint by a factor of 2. So that was what then C3 Energy was all about. And then as the market evolved, it became apparent that, that people, and this was basically about applying big data, IoT, and AI to solve problems that had been previously unsolvable. As we get into 2014, 15, 16, it becomes apparent that everybody wants to do this, not just utility operators. And so in 2016, we relaunched the company that said that we could now, C3.ai, to bring these solutions to all markets. So today we serve leading manufacturing companies like 3M, United States Air Force, Defense Intelligence Agency, Caterpillar. We're the AI platform at Royal Dutch Shell. We're the AI platform at Baker Hughes. So we've become the world's leading provider of industrial and commercial AI solutions.
And why do you think it came together that way? It's an interesting sort of, it's not a conundrum. I'm probably looking for a different word. But we had at our Forbes CIO conference about a year and a half ago, we had Diane Green, who is still the CEO of Google Cloud. And she said something that I know Scott Guthrie at Microsoft, who runs Microsoft Azure, would say, Andy Jassy at AWS would say too, that there's this feeling that the pace of digital evolution has sped up, Diane said, by a factor of 2 to 3. The root level of digital evolution was running 2 to 3 times faster than the kind of 50-year period that we were just coming out of, where Moore's law was the governing factor of how fast the digital evolution could occur. And this is occurring, funnily enough, at a time when the semiconductor people were telling you that Moore's law was actually slowing down because you're getting to such microscopic densities, and the cost of a new fab is $5 to $10 billion. That Moore's law went from maybe 18 months doubling to 24 months to now, maybe every 36 months. So A, do you agree that the root level of technology is speeding up? And B, how is that happening when actually the rate of semiconductor progress is on the margin slowing down?
When I went to work for Oracle in 1983, the worldwide market for information technology was, say, $50 billion. Today it's $3.5 trillion, and in 5 years it'll be $8 to $9 trillion. So it is definitely accelerating. As it relates to this phenomenon that we call digital transformation, which is associated with these technology vectors that we discussed, McKinsey Global Institute describes this change that's happening as 10 times faster than the Industrial Revolution, with 300 times more change happening. So this is 3,000 times the impact of the Industrial Revolution. So this is big. Now, while Moore's law may in fact be slowing down, this relates to the number of transistors that we might, the density of transistors on a semiconductor. In fact, with the cloud, it's effectively accelerating. So now we have, it used to be not that long ago when we used to compute on 8-bit processors at 300 hertz cycles, right? So we need to be very careful about how we're using those space and those registers and those clock cycles. Well, today, with the elastic cloud, we can compute on literally tens of thousands of processors in parallel doing 64-bit floating point operations, and storage is virtually infinite, and all of this is essentially free. So I think by the time Andy and Satya are through slitting each other's throat, this stuff will be free. So we have infinite computing capacity, and infinite computing capacity available to you tonight, and all you have to do is put your credit card on the line at Microsoft or Google or AWS. Infinite's a big number, and it's a lot of capacity, and so we're able to solve problems that were previously unsolvable, and it is a major change, and it is definitely an accelerator.
Well, in your book, Digital Transformation, you not only cited Daniel Bell and the history of technology and and how that affected society. But you also quoted the late great paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould and his theory of punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium means that because the fossil record supporting evolution has these gaps in it, you have either we're missing the parts of the fossil record, huge major parts, or there are these periods in time when the pace of progress doesn't go up in a linear way, it jumps the tracks. The meteor strike happens, the dinosaurs go extinct, something else happens to take its place. And you talked about this using Gould's analogy, talked about that we are in an era of where business around the world is experiencing now or shortly experience a punctuated equilibrium. Tell us what you mean by that.
Okay, so Charles Darwin, many of you read, or certainly everybody knows about, On the Origin of Species, and he came up with this idea of natural selection as the driver for the speciation of the planet. And everybody thought, and Darwin thought, that this was a continuous function, much like Moore's Law. And the problem was he couldn't explain the gaps in the fossil record. And I think this is the middle of the 19th century, I think 1859, okay, when he published The Origin of Species. I could be off by a couple of years.
No, that's correct.
That's right, good guess. Okay, but he couldn't explain the gaps in the fossil record, and what he said is, well, we just haven't found those fossils yet. And it wasn't until 1972 that Stephen Gould, an evolutionary biologist from Harvard, said, well, evolution was not a continuous function. And in fact, it's highly discontinuous. So I think the planet's been around for about 4.5 billion years. We've had life on the planet for roughly 3.5 billion years. Okay, and in the last, say, 400 million years alone, we've had 5 mass extinction events, okay, on Earth, in these mass extinction events, as much as 96% of the species on Earth would become extinct. And the most recent being this KT extinction that we all know about, where this meteor hit the Yucatan, 65 million years ago? And this is when all the volcanoes erupted, and we had mass climate change, and the dinosaurs had been enormously successful species. They had been on Earth for order of 150 million years, and they became extinct. And so when these events happened, and you had these big voids in the ecosystem, we'd have these mass respeciation events. And so where all these vacuums would be filled by new species, and these organisms with new DNA. Well, that worked out well for us because the mammals filled the space that the dinosaurs had, and so that story so far is going pretty well. And the reason I draw this parallel as I got involved in C3, and I'm going around the world visiting with CEOs in Singapore, New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Rome. We have all of a sudden the CEOs at the table, okay, talking about the mandate for digital transformation. I've been in this business for 4 decades. Okay, the CEO was never at the table before, right? As we brought mainframe computing to market, mini computer, personal computers, relational database technology, enterprise application software, CRM, the cloud, it was always the CIO, right? And the CIO was there that was the gate was making technology decisions. And the CIO would, as we brought these two new technologies to market, the CIO would invariably decide they were going to build it with his or her own team, was going to build it themselves. And then, you wait for that person to get fired, you come back 2 years later, and you sell them the product. This is how it worked. And now all of a sudden, at the table, we have the CEO is at the table. Where'd the CEO come from? Okay, mandating this thing called digital transformation. And this is what inspired the book. Because I'm talking to these people at companies like, whether it was State Grid in China, or Engie in Paris, or Renault, or BlackRock in New York. And when you poked at the question, it was clear that nobody had a common view of what it was. You never really got they were all kind of blind people touching the elephant, trying to figure out what it was. And so after 8 years of of talking to people, I sat down to write the book, and I think I know what it is. I think, in fact, we are experiencing a mass extinction event in the corporate world right in this part of the 21st century. And in fact, in the last 18 years, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies have become extinct. They're gone. They're off the list. I mean, where is Kodak? Where is Westinghouse? Where is Toys R Us? Where is Sears? Okay, where is GE? GE might still be on the list. I don't know, but not for long. Anyway, and then we, see in the newspaper every day, and in Forbes and Fortune and Wall Street Journal and in Google, we see about all these companies that are all here with new DNA, right? And so we have, let's take Tesla. Let's look at what's Tesla all about. I mean, I'm not sure whether Tesla's going to be successful in the long run or not, but they most certainly are going to upend the automotive industry, right? And so this is all about, big data, AI, IoT on wheels. Okay, ditto for Uber. No cars, no drivers, and they're changing the transportation business. How about retailing? Amazon. I mean, 8,000 retail outlets in the United States alone have closed in the last 12 months, and yet you'll have Amazon, AI, IoT, big data, focused at retailing. And they're doing a pretty good job, right? So now, I think what this is about is this is recognition from companies that, imagine, okay, when we brought, say, ERP systems to market, accounting systems. Nobody needed that. I mean, they were going to build it themselves. Imagine today trying to run a company without an accounting system, without an ERP system. It's unthinkable. How many companies today operate without CRM systems? Oh, that would be none, okay? And yet when we brought it to market, nobody needed it, and they were all going to build it themselves. And now there's a recognition, I think, on the part of leading CEOs at companies like 3M, with great vision, and companies like organizations like the United States Air Force, the Department of Defense, the Department of the Army, Enel, Engie, Royal Dutch Shell, Baker Hughes, that unless they embrace these technologies and become leaders in their field, that they will become extinct. They'll be acquired by, they'll cease to exist. That's what I think digital transformation is about. I think it's an existential mandate, and we kind of have two classes of CEOs. We have those who are leading their companies with great vision to really thrive in this 21st century economy. And there are those who are, basically sitting around, hoping to make it to retirement. And, those are the companies that, will cease to exist.
How do you see this accelerated rate of evolution to the point where it's a situation of punctuated equilibrium? It's sort of playing out differently across different industries, though, that either highly capital-intensive industries or highly regulated industries, which are often the same industries, they've got more time to think this through, or do they not?
And yet, the perfect example of capital-intensive, highly regulated would be the utility industry, okay? And that might be the pinnacle there. And that was the first industry, I would say, to adopt AI and IoT at massive scale. And so I think this is, when we're done, this changes everything about computing. I think this is, this market is expected to be, for just at this space of basically industrial and commercial AI, is a $250 billion software market in 2023. Well, 2023 is a blink of an eye, folks. And $250 billion is a pretty big software market. Okay, and so I think that this is adopted in manufacturing, it's defense, it's intelligence, it's government services, it's manufacturing, it's automotive, travel, transportation, communications, consumer packaged goods. There's no industry that has not changed.
What do intelligent people misunderstand about AI? You make a pretty clear distinction between a general AI, which is a lot farther out there, and then highly specific, very effective AI. But I think, at least if not in business, at least in popular culture, the two get conflated. But tell me how you look at that. What is AI able to do? What will it be able to do in 5 or 10 years, what are the thornier problems that may take another generation or two?
Great question. And, you know, the analogy that I use is, you know, Julius Caesar used to say that, you know, Gaul was divided into 3 parts. And I think you can look at AI that way too. The first, you have AGI, or kind of artificial general intelligence. This is kind of the Google DeepMind idea, where we're in the idea of the singularity with Ray Kurzweil, where we're going to develop computers that are, you know, as smart or smarter than human beings. And this is the idea that of the computer. This is the, you know, malevolent robot that you have in the refrigerator that takes over your house, okay? I don't think we need to worry about that anytime soon. And so I think that, you know, all the hype aside, this doesn't happen anywhere near in our lifetimes. I think if we look at the, you know, compared to a human being, I think if you look at the most powerful computer that we can conceive of today, it has the intellect of basically a mealworm. Now, okay, let's go to the third category, which is the use of AI for social media. Now this, I think, what's going on there is, you know, truly malevolent, okay? And I think this is really problematic, where the social media companies have figured out how to manipulate people at the level of the limbic brain. So limbic brain, this has to do with the release of a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And this is, you know, while it happens every day when you hug your spouse or you shake somebody's hand or you have a cup of coffee, you get a release of dopamine. It's also what happens if, you know, you do a couple of lines of methamphetamine, okay? Except that it's just there, it's like a couple of orders of magnitude larger, and it causes some irreparable damage. Now, there's a professor at Stanford by the name of B.J. Fogg who has written a book on, you know, how to use computers and manipulate people at the level of the limbic brain. And there are social media companies that are using that to manipulate, say, 2.2 billion people at a time. And this is causing this. There are some adverse consequences associated with this in terms of, you know, we have an entire generation of people who, you know, who are being affected by these technologies. I can remember I sat next to, what's his name, Michael Zeisler at a Goldman Sachs dinner. And this guy would say the most outrageous statements. And one of them he said that I haven't stopped thinking about. He said, you know, Tom, when history is written, social media may go down as the most destructive event in the history of civilization. And I think he might be right, okay? And so we're there, you know, this, you know, the consequences of this, or the benefits are substantial, okay? But the consequences, you know, loneliness, depression, suicide, okay, with the weaponization of these systems, okay, you know, we're questioned, and it's a fact I think it's questionable whether we're able to, you know, whether democratic processes are able to function, you know, as the weaponization of these systems. So this is really troubling. Okay. Now get off that rant. Okay, I'm getting ready to hold a conference on this subject at the University of Chicago next month. Who's the Siebel Scholar that's in the room? There's some Siebel Scholars here, right? And Brian and some others. Well, you come to Chicago, okay? It's going to be good. The topic is social media. What could possibly go wrong? And it'll be at the University of Chicago, and it's going to be interesting. Now, let's get to the third category, is the use of artificial intelligence for business and commercial processes. This has to do with precision medicine. This has to do with production optimization. This has to do with a problem we call stochastic optimization, the supply chain, supply network risk, customer churn. And this is mostly all, you know, sunshine and light, okay? But it has, you know, it enables organizations to deliver products, you know, and services at lower cost, more effectively, into the hands of more satisfied customers. It enables, for example, precision medicine, where soon we'll be able to predict for the population, say, of the United States or France, but the United States, say we have roughly, 330 million people, and we'll be able to tell in advance who's going to be diagnosed with what disease in the next 5 years. And, well, that's, you know, then we can intervene clinically and avoid the diagnosis. So the social and economic consequences of that are pretty good, right? Well, the genome sequences of the population of the United States in this database, and so we'll have, in this data set, so we'll have genome-specific medicine, which will be enormously efficacious. Adverse drug reactions, AI-assisted medicine. I don't think, contrary to the IBM ads, I don't think computers are going to replace physicians anytime soon, but they certainly will assist in more accurate diagnoses. Now, What's the downside? I mean, so healthcare, people live longer, they're healthier, healthcare is lower, we have lower rates of addiction being an adverse drug reaction. Okay, what's the downside? Well, who is running this system? Okay, is it the healthcare provider? Is it the United States government? How are they going to behave? We know that companies don't behave well. Okay, you see Silicon Valley for details, and it's to see social media for details. I know I'm getting myself in trouble here, but now, what are these companies going to do with these data? Okay, who cares about pre-existing conditions when we know what you're going to be diagnosed with in the next 5 years? Are we going to use this to set prices? Are we going to use this to withhold care? Are we going to use this to prioritize who gets care? Well, you know what's going to happen. Okay, and by the way, I mean, how are they going to use these data about which of us is going to be diagnosed with a terminal illness in the next 3 years? And do you want to know? I mean, I'm not sure I do. So it's pretty scary stuff. And I think there are some personal privacy issues associated with what's going on here that are daunting. And also as this IoT phenomenon continues to promulgate, which is kind of IoT and AI are two sides of the same coin. I mean, this dramatically increases the surface area that's available for cyber attack, right? And we have bad actors, who are peppering our critical infrastructure and financial systems and power grid systems with viruses, okay, and malware, where they can just turn these systems off. And so, weaponization of these systems, the privacy issues, the security issues, I think there's some very troubling problems that I don't think society is yet ready to address. And if we don't address them, we will not be happy.
And all you wanted to do is help remove carbon from the atmosphere when you when you thought of this. But that leads me, and you've got in your customer base so far, you have you're really strong in electric utilities, oil and gas. What's next for C3 AI? The Defense Department, fighter jet maintenance, predictive maintenance. What customer sets out there do you think are next for C3, and what problems describe those customer sets?
Well, manufacturing will be a huge market for us. And I think one of the leading company in that field today in terms of using AI to optimize manufacturing processes is in fact 3M out of Minneapolis. Oil and gas will be huge. I'll go with Royal Dutch Shell. It's about a 300 billion euro company that is transitioning themselves to a clean energy company, to a very clean energy company, using AI and IoT to decrease the environmental impact. Okay, increase the rate of renewables. Okay, increase safety, increase reliability, lower cost. Defense and intelligence is huge. What we do in AI-based predictive maintenance for the United States Air Force, E3 Sentry, C5 Galaxy, F-15, F-16, F-18, F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, Space Command. Okay, we're now tracking all these objects that are out there. Precision health with 3M, again, a leader in this field. It's every problem we're solving is a problem that has never been solved before. For example, the largest grid operator in the free world is a company called Enel. They're based in Rome. They have 60 million meters in 40 countries. Putting that in perspective, there are 100 million meters in the United States. So this is serviced by 3,250 utilities. So this is a pretty big utility. And in Spain and Italy, we have aggregated 10 trillion rows of data from 42 million meters, 75 million sensors, all their enterprise information systems, and then we go out to the extranet for terrain, social media, and weather. This is 10 trillion rows of data aggregated into a petabyte image. It grows at 300 gigabytes a day. We process these data at 1 million transactions per second to dramatically increase the safety, resilience, reliability of that grid infrastructure. And then at C3 alone, we update that database 65 billion times a day. That's just on our end, okay, with weather, social media, terrain. 65 billion times a day. Get your mind around this. So these are there's no problem we're working on that's ever been solved before. There's really difficult stuff, really challenging, and it's really fun.
What would you say is your primary business model, your unfair advantage in a marketplace that so many different companies see? I mean, give credit to GE for seeing it. They didn't score a lot of points on the execution front. But how do you see the unique niche and set of capabilities that C3 occupies?
Great question. We spent a decade and about $600 million building a technology platform that's something called a model-driven architecture, which is, I would describe as a next-generation software architecture, kind of beyond, the next step beyond what most of us know, which is structured programming. And this model-driven architecture is what we call a complete suite that allows our customers, be it in defense, be it in financial services at Bank of America, be it in manufacturing, be it in the grid, be it in the oil and gas business, to rapidly design, develop, provision, and operate these kind of very massive industrial scale AI and IoT applications. Now, a piece of software that works it took us 10 years with some very highly experienced people to accomplish this. I think that for another company to do it, I think it would take them a minimum of 10 years to do it. The difference being, if a large company tries to do it, they're going to do it with 1 or 2 or 3,000 people. And with 1 or 2 or 3,000 software engineers, you can't do anything. And so we have a piece of software that works. It works very well, and that is the competitive advantage. And we have some people who I think are quite competent. For those of you who have come to visit us, we have, I think, about 400 extraordinarily bright people. Last year we had 40,000 applications for 100 positions at the company. 40,000 applications. We had 10,000 in the last 3 months. So this would be, and there people are coming from Rome and Boston and Paris. I think we'll likely be 3,000 to 4,000 people in 3 years, and to work there every day just is palpably kind of vibrating with excitement and enthusiasm and energy. And we're visited by customers. Today we were visited by the Undersecretary of the Army and his staff, the executive team from 3M, 2 CEOs in the executive team from Koch Industries, and the CEO of NG North America. That's one day. And so the place is just on fire. It is really fun.
With all that mentioned, the IPO window is wide open. Say what you will about that, but are you tempted to jump through it?
I was the CEO of a public company for 43 quarters, so who's counting? And so I'm pretty familiar with that experience. I think that the most likely outcome, I think, is that C3 will be a standalone public company. But when you look at many of the companies that are going public today, they have no business being public. And when the music stops, things are going to come crashing down around them, and it's going to be horrible. So I am unfortunately not 21 years old, and I didn't graduate from college yesterday. I'm not looking for my 15 minutes here, and we're not going to take a company public before it's ready to be a public company. But if and when it's ready, I think that is the most likely outcome.
Well, we are now open for audience Q&A. How are we going to handle that, Karen? Okay, we've got mic runners here. So
questions?
Yeah.
Right here.
Got hands.
If you please identify yourself, that'd be great.
Yep, my name is Lindsay Gore. I'm with Microsoft, so thanks so much for coming. I just had a question as a younger person in this field, and I love your sort of story about finding yourself and going back to school. What's your recommendation about that if you were coming up in this generation today, especially given all the major technological change you've seen and predict in the future?
If I were graduating from school today, I would go to work for a great company like Microsoft, with a great leader like Microsoft, and I would learn how it's done. I would learn how to support customers. I would learn how to market products. I would learn how to sell stuff. I would learn how to hire I would make a bunch of mistakes, somebody else sense, okay, and then I would go out and start my company. But Microsoft would be a great example of a really, really superlative organization to work for, and I mean that very sincerely. Why Satya is not on the cover of every magazine in America is something I can't quite should be.
Next question.
Your dedication to American business and promoting us around the world. And I'm with the state of Arizona, and there's been a big push in Arizona about smart cities. And can you talk a little bit about your new company, and are they helping on the smart cities initiative?
Yes, we're very involved with one of our customers called Engie, about a 70 billion euro integrated energy company based in Paris. The CEO is our partner is a physicist, a woman by the name of Isabel Kosher, and we're involved in smart cities initiatives. For example, we've taken over the entire operation of the energy footprint for Ohio State University. Again, we're going to go cut the ribbon on that, I think, the 25th of next month. Okay, we're dramatically, getting ready to do the same thing for the University of Illinois system, some major hospital programs, and that will be a global initiative. But smart cities is clearly one of the big opportunities, whether it relates to energy, whether it relates to maintenance, whether it relates to variable speed limits to reduce traffic congestion. So I think there's a huge opportunity there, and yes, we are all over it.
Next question.
I'll be getting off easy here, Rich.
Hi, John Paul Farsight from 75f.io. And my question was related to the origin story of C3 and how it came from initially talking about global warming and solving all that. And one big part of that equation is building, basically office building and other similar building technologies. And what do you think about the potential for digital transformation to disrupt the building controls and building equipment market?
I think it's a huge opportunity, and we're all over it. That was the first product we built. Okay, this is the same technology that we're using at Ohio State University, University of Illinois, Cisco. We're using it at Engie in Paris. And so I think that, we will dramatically change the way that people think about their energy and carbon footprint in managing their facilities around the world. And I think there's a huge opportunity there, and we're very active in that space.
Next question.
Hi, good evening. Charles Cassidy from McKinsey, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time this evening. One question I just wanted to ask you was about construction, which is an industry I didn't hear you mention at all. And if I think about so many of the enablers for all of the things that just have to happen to deliver a step change in terms of carbon usage, or indeed deliver on some of the wider promises of some of the other technologies we've talked about. This is the only industry in the world that's seen negative productivity growth in 50 years. And as I've been working with my colleagues, we've sort of really struggled to get much traction with digital use cases in construction. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that topic.
It's a great question. It's not, you've hit firmly on an area that I know absolutely nothing about.
I will say, I spoke at a Bechtel conference about 6 months ago, and they've had a big generational passing of the torch a couple years ago. So the CEO of Bechtel today is in his late 30s, and I think gets this. How deeply he gets it, I don't know, but I saw a clear generational change in that big construction company's attitude.
Raj, how are you?
Doing good, Tom. Good seeing you. For the security of all these wonderful new attack
Raj is a
surfaces.
Siebel Scholar from what year?
Siebel Scholar, class of 2001 from
2001.
Chicago.
Where, Chicago?
Chicago.
Chicago University
I'll see you in
Chicago.
October. Looking forward to it.
Nice to see you.
For all of these new attack surfaces that are being created, who do you see as making the greatest advances for securing it? Public sector, private sector? Neither seem to be doing well for really protecting some of the cybersecurity aspects of all these great new technologies.
Well, it's a great question. It's a really important question. I think that what's going on in AI is absolute warfare, okay, and it's kind of open warfare now with China. Vladimir Putin said in 2017, whoever wins the war on AI dominates the world. I think that's true, and it will not be Russia. I think the Chinese are spending $20 billion a year right now on AI and going to 60 billion soon. And it is, we have this is a war that we do not want to lose. I think fundamentally, this is a test of two diametrically opposed political philosophies. Where in the case of China, we have a top-down command and control totalitarian state run by the NRDC, and they call the shots, they write it up in the 13th five-year plan, and everybody kind of does that in lockstep. Now, in the United States, we have this very messy free market economy where things happen in garages in Palo Alto and storefronts in the Bronx. And, historically, that system has worked well. And I think this will be the ultimate test. And if we lose this one, we will be very unhappy. Hi.
Can you hold the mic a little closer? Yeah.
You're on. I think, honestly, AI may contribute to these social and political problems more than it might solve them in the short run. I mean, really, and contribute significantly. And so I think, this is a very significant technological change. And these changes, the consequences are not all good. I mean, let's look at the invention of the Gutenberg press, right? The movable type, the printing press. The result of that was now you no longer had scribes writing Bibles only in Latin. Bibles were written in whatever the native language was, and the result was the Reformation, Martin Luther, and centuries of religious war. Okay, we can draw a straight line between the invention of the steam engine and the Jacquard loom. Well, the benefit was the Industrial Revolution, right? And a lot of people would argue that was a pretty good thing. I think probably it was, okay? But at the same time, you got a straight line between those developments and, child labor, communism, World War I, World War II. These were adverse consequences that didn't work out so well, okay? The current exchanges going on between China and the United States are just, continuation of World War II. We still live in that shadow. And so you can draw, so why I think there are enormous social and economic benefits from AI. I mean, I think the social implications of what's going on in social media are really deleterious. The political implications are deleterious. I think that these technologies that I'm involved in bringing to market, we need to be very careful about this stuff. We need to think about what the consequences are, and if we don't anticipate the consequences, and you don't know me very well, but I have no use for government, right? And but this is a case where I think that if government does not step up and do its job and regulate, we will be very sorry.
Hi, Dave Rowe from Doremus. You had some nice things to say about Larry Ellison earlier. Just wondering about your feelings on Mark Benioff and Salesforce, and looking back to the rivalry between Siebel and Salesforce with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, if you might have done anything differently to kind of blunt the disruption that Salesforce caused.
I know Mark very well. He's a very talented guy. I used to work with him at Oracle. Candidly, I don't remember any rivalry between Salesforce and Siebel. About the time we sold Siebel to Oracle, Salesforce was about that big, okay? And so Salesforce was still a footnote. It was later on that they developed into a real company, and they've been obviously enormously successful, and Mark has run a hugely successful company, and good for him. It's not that easy. So, I know him, I'm proud of him, and I think he should be very proud of what he's accomplished.
We have come to the end of our time, so let's give Tom a big hand.
Ladies and gentlemen.
our speakers disband, we would like to thank you with a small token of our appreciation. And it is, of course, the Churchill Club speaker t-shirt.
All right, thank you. Thank you. That's got it. Thank you, appreciate it.
Please wear that in very good health. Wanted to tell you about a few upcoming programs quickly before we disband for the evening. First, this Thursday up in San Francisco, we're putting AI algorithms in the org chart, asking whether AI algorithms perhaps ought to be trained and coached the same way people are, given the way that they are deployed and given how, I suppose, black boxy they are. Then on the 12th of September, we have our Churchill's event, the 9th annual, and there we're going to have senior executives from Slack, Peloton, Zoom, also Carl Guardino from the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, and John W. Thompson, the chairman of Microsoft. And then on the 16th, we have Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft. We're working on new programs beyond that, so please do keep an eye on us and join us when you can. You have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Good night.
Yeah. He wants to zap us a couple times.